Mic check, 1, 2. 1, 2. Governor Stitt's press conference, Blue Room. One, two, mic check. No, are we good on over on ours? Perfect. Are we all getting sound okay? Okay, perfect. Check, 1, 2.
Good morning, good afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. Wanted to open with, I brought a PowerPoint presentation that I wanted to kind of walk us through, and Oklahomans, why I think it's important that we get a tax cut done this year, a half and a path. And so let's go to the first slide. So our total spending authority, so you're hearing a lot of people say that, well, we're $300 million in the hole. I don't know if anybody's heard that. We've got $300 million less in revenue. First off, our spending authority is $12.36 billion, okay? So that's how much the Board of Equalization said Oklahomans can spend. But really, I kind of take how much we can spend, the Board of Equalization, there's a lot of nuance to those numbers. What's our income? It's just like Oklahomans. How much is our salary? How much do we actually make? So from all revenue sources, our income as a state is $11.2 billion, okay? Our expenses, that means if every single agency gets the same amount as they got last year, so flat budgets, no cuts whatsoever. I'm never suggesting that we have to cut services, anything like that. I'm trying to hold the budgets flat. I'm trying to slow the growth of government. So the have-to things like flex benefit increases for teachers, all that kind of stuff, and flat budgets, same thing they got last year, is $11.1 billion, all right? So all we're doing is taking out some one-time items. Last year's budget, and I know I'm getting in the weeds, but I think it's important that you hear this. Last year's budget was over $12 billion, but those were one-time items, like we were doing a new software, you're fixing this building up, but not an ongoing expense, right? That's why I always talk about ongoing obligations, salaries, expenses, the rent, the electricity, those ongoing things we have to pay, $11.1 billion. We're not $300 million in the hole. Our income is 11.2, and our expenses right now are 11.1, all right? So, next slide. Savings account. Savings is important in our personal budgets, our personal lives. Most financial planners would tell you you need about 6 months worth of expenses saved. We all have our 401k accounts. We're all saving for retirement. The government's no different. When I took office as a businessman governor, we had no money in savings. So I thought it was really important that we develop a healthy savings account so we can weather a downturn, because revenue doesn't just always go up in a straight line. So right now, we currently have $4.6 billion in our savings account. At the end of this fiscal year, which will be coming up at the end of June, all right, as soon as June 30th is over, we're going to have over $5 billion in our savings account, all right? We can invest some of this. We can save it. We can invest it in strategic things. You know, there's the OSU needs a new vet center. There's a lot of great things that we can do in the state. And the legislature's working on that. Those are tough jobs, right? But we have to do a tax cut, all right? The cut doesn't mean that the government is being cut $240 million. It means that Oklahomans are going to receive a pay raise. They're going to keep more of their money. It's their money in the first place, okay? Next slide. All right, this is a great example. Every time that historically we have cut taxes, revenue expands because people feel better about themselves. Oklahomans have more money in their pocket. That means they go to the restaurants and then they go to the grocery store. They spend more money on their children. Businesses feel better because they're getting more customers. They're hiring more people. That money spends in the economy. This is a great example here because a lot of Oklahomans may not remember this, but we used to be at 7% income tax, all right, 7%. So over the years, this chart tells you, way back here, we cut 0.35% out of income, okay? And then we cut 40 basis points, 0.4%. And then we had a 0.6%, and on and on and on, all the way till we get from 2004 to today, 2025, and you can see the revenues just continuing to climb, okay? Our economy's expanding. So when we make a cut to government, and so government doesn't have as much revenue this year, nothing is static. It actually grows the pie, all right? Next slide. Why is this important? To slow the growth of government, number one, to put more money in the people's pockets, number two, but also to be competitive with the states that we have to compete with. When we recruit companies to Oklahoma, they're asking about our workforce, they're asking about our tax policy, they're asking about a lot of things, right? If we do not cut taxes and stay up with our competition, we're going to be an outlier when it comes to tax policy. Here's a perfect example. If you look at the states around us, obviously Texas has a 0% income tax. Mississippi is on a path to zero. They cut this year to 4%, okay, by 2026, and by 2030, then they're going to have a path to zero. South Carolina went from 6.2 to 3%. We've got Arkansas just went to 3.9. We had Kansas cut a full point. Iowa, Nebraska, Iowa's at 3.8. Nebraska just cut to a 3 handle, so they're on a path now to the 3s. Colorado is lower than us. Florida is lower than us. Tennessee's at 0. Florida's at 0. Wyoming's at 0. We can absolutely do it. And I'm not saying we're going to do it overnight, but I'm saying you're just going to do a little bit each year, and we can take a pause until revenue continues to grow, okay? There's nothing like the present. I've called 3 special sessions for tax cuts. We should have done a 1/4 point last year. We should have done a 1/4 point the year before. We'd be sitting at 4 1/4 right now, okay? Next slide. Okay, polling. I don't really look at polling, but I know some people in the legislature and the media probably wants to report on that. What do Oklahomans think about it? Oklahomans, independents, conservatives, Republicans, are we not polling Democrats here, guys? What are y'all doing? Overwhelmingly, 81% of Republicans support it, 60% of independents. I don't know why there's no Democrats on there. I'm not joking. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Guys, we need to poll them, see where they're at, just to show everybody. But those are the cases why we can afford it. Oklahomans deserve it. We've got a savings account. We're not saying we're going to ever cut core services. We're trying to be the most business-friendly state in the country. If we do that, it helps education, it helps infrastructure, it helps healthcare. Everybody wins. All boats rise when we get our economy booming in the state of Oklahoma. I don't want to be left behind as other states continue to move this needle. Okay. Next slide. I think that was it, right? Yeah, there we go. So with that, let me pause and open it up to questions, comments, what you'd like to. We may have a microphone running around.
Afternoon, sir. Fox 25 has learned that your mental health commissioner has been portraying herself as a licensed counselor after her license permanently expired, contrary to state law. We were wondering if this was something you were concerned about, and if you were aware of the situation, how long you've known about that for.
Not aware of that situation, but no, we hired her to oversee this agency, not to be a counselor still. I think that was her previous background when she worked for Integris, but I haven't heard that, and I'm not concerned about it.
Do you have confidence in her ability to lead the agency?
Oh, 100%. You're talking about the mental health agency, Allie Friesen? Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Are they going to be able to get a supplemental this year? She said yesterday it's about a 40 million some odd shortfall, down from 60.
If we need a supplemental in mental health because there's folks that need services, then we're going to be supportive of that. How much that is, I don't know yet. But if we need one, sure. We've got a $5 billion savings account. We can absolutely do that. But the big picture on these agencies, this is exactly what Trump's going through. This is exactly what DOGE is. When you ask questions, let me just say this. Oklahomans will understand this. If you don't want any waves to be made in state government, pay every invoice. Never question anything. Then there's never a squeaky wheel. As soon as you start holding people accountable, you start asking questions, you start looking at things, people start spinning. They start calling the media. They start saying people are going to die. They start calling their legislator. They start going crazy. Here's the deal. We will hold people accountable in the Stitt administration, and I applaud them for looking at every expenses, and nothing's been cut. She's put people on notice for discretionary bonuses. And I think Oklahomans would be very interested to know that we have nonprofit CEOs in the mental health space at Grand Lake Mental Health, okay? making $1.3 million. The COO at that organization was making $1.1 million. That is a lot of money for Oklahoma. They're making off of the taxpayer. So we should be asking questions. Are those dollars going on target, actually helping folks? Or have they been spending at the top level of the bureaucracy, so to speak? So when I've been doing some research on this, I figured I'd get a question. These same organizations, South Carolina, for example, treat a lot more patients. Their CEOs, the top one was making $335,000 a year. Still a lot of money from my book, but not $1.3 million. I could go on and on. We've got CEOs making $674,000, $536,000, $535,000 at nonprofit mental health agencies. I'm absolutely applauding Allie for asking these questions, because when I know what the Trump administration is doing with DOGE, and they're going to change the reimbursement with Medicaid potentially from 90-10 to a 70-30, we better be asking these questions. Grand Lake right now is, they are per person, they're billing the state $6,700 per person, where Hope Community Mental Health is billing the state $2,600 per month. That's a big discrepancy for doing the exact same thing, wouldn't you say? Those are the kind of questions that I ask as a business person, and I encourage our agency heads to dig into and to ask those questions to make sure the tax dollars are being spent wisely.
The DOGE report that came out yesterday, can you talk about the next steps for some of these cuts? And then dealing with the $157 million in federal health grants, some concerns from Democratic lawmakers that that money is just going to go to other states. Your response to that?
For the
$157 million in federal health grants that the DOGE report was looking to cut, their concern is if that money is sent back to the federal level, it's just going to go to other states, and we're going to lose core health services.
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about on the $157 million, but the deal with when I talk to the Trump administration, when they think about getting rid of the bureaucracy, let's take FEMA, for example, because I know they're talking about FEMA when we talk about the Department of Education. I think Oklahomans, has anybody in this room graduated before 1979 from high school? Don't be shy. I know a couple of y'all did. Well, how is that possible since the Federal Department of Education wasn't set up until 1979? Jimmy Carter signed that into existence. So when Trump wants to remove the Department of Education, the money still flows to the states. It's the states that are hiring the teachers. It's the states that are building the schools, educating the kids without that bureaucracy at the top. So the point is, we're talking about flexibility at the state level. We're talking about just getting rid of a bureaucracy level, but having those flexible dollars at the state level, okay? So the $157 million, I would have to check on that, but if it's something that they're changing at the federal level, I still think it's going to be block grant to the states, and I'd have to check specifically on the specifics you're talking about.
Governor, back to mental health, revenues, all these things. I'm curious how you have communicated to your agency directors that, since 2019, you've had the ability to hire and fire, right? Which a lot of people wanted that power. You have asked them for flat budgets for several years now. And I'm curious, do you have a concern that their efforts to appease you in that request helped create the situation we're seeing now at ODMHSAS, at DHS, where not making the request a year ago, 2 years ago, to meet these $20 million, $40 million increases puts us in a pickle now? Does the desire to keep it flat so you can afford a tax cut, does that affect their ability to ask for what they really want?
100% no. No, not at all. If you look at the mental health budget, they've increased mental health spending appropriations from the state level probably, 15, 20% over the last 6 years. Also, you've got the federal dollars coming in that have increased significantly over the last few years. The problem is, this is my third director, and just holding people accountable. And then underneath, and I've met with Ally, and I think she would tell you also that the bureaucracy underneath her, when she finally got her people in place and had the right questions asked, nobody is asking questions with this spending with Grand Lake, for example, with sending them $148 million, or this group. What are the outcomes? What are the discretionary bonuses that have just been given out and given to these organizations without any outcome-based or any questions asked? So, it's again, these are simple principles, holding people accountable for outcomes, and maybe the question is, why don't we give more money to the community group that's charging the state $2,600 per patient versus $6,700? Well, they don't pay their CEO $1.3 million is one thing. So, listen, as the governor of Oklahoma, I'm going to continue to dig on these things. I'm going to continue to ask the questions. The problem is with the bureaucracy is they think they always hold the higher ground. Well, sure, let's spend more money on this. Let's spend more money on this. Let's spend more money on this. We need more of everything, right? But it's at the end of the day, you have to make tough choices. And it's the same thing that our federal government's going through. I'm not saying that all these programs and the humanitarian efforts around the world aren't important, but can we really keep borrowing $2 trillion to fund all these things? So those are the questions we're asking ourselves as Oklahomans is, how much should we be spending as a state, right? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hold people accountable, and we're going to make sure those dollars are used efficiently. And besides asking questions and putting people on notice that we're looking at them, and then watching them squirm and call the media and try to say people are dying, I mean, that's their first move that they go to, because they don't want you to move their $1.3 million salary.
Good afternoon, Governor. So you've said a lot about of third parties, contractors getting money. Our State Department of Education has had $600,000 in bonuses that Ryan Walters approved last year, including one of his policy advisors. What would you say to that? And also, secondarily, on the state level, one of your cabinet members, Stephen Harp, is one of the highest paid agency directors among corrections people in the country. So outside of like third-party people getting paid, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say, well, on the first part of it, listen, I think those bonuses, I'm not in his position. I don't run that agency, but it sounds expensive to pay a bonus to someone that lives out of state to advise you on whatever he's advising him on, or whatever they're doing. Yeah, I don't pay $600,000 bonuses. I didn't know I was allowed to in the governor's office. And just like I said before, the governor should be appointing all those statewide elected officials. It would be run more like some of the other states. And there's too many politics involved, because people are now running for their next elected office out of their current position. So can't do anything about the bonuses. As far as the salary to Harp, he's not on my cabinet, but he runs the Department of Corrections. And, I don't know what it is compared to other ones, but I think his salary is somewhere around $250,000. Is that right? It's a lot of money. It's not $1.3 million, but he handles a $1 billion budget or more. He's done a really good job and manages 2,000 employees. And I think it's equivalent. He made more in the private sector. And so that is what it is. And if the legislature wants to cap all salaries in state government at what the governor's is, or move the governor up, that'd be fine too. But just kidding about that. But those are there. He's within a bracket, I think, and that's always a hard deal. But whenever you hire people, you really usually, or the way I've done it in the past, is I look at what their salaries were before, where they're coming from. We've got medical doctors that can make more in the private sector when we have them running Department of Health. I've paid them historically more money than another agency director, maybe with a bachelor's degree. But also, when you think about running these big state agencies, they are running billion-dollar budgets. They're running 2,000 employees. You need people with business acumen to run them. These are big CEO roles, and that's not dissimilar to heck. It's on the lower list of the nonprofits here that I'm reading off. So. Yes, sir.
This past week, has been a talker with the state forester who's been removed and everything. So I wanted to ask you, you've obviously talked about this and the ineffectiveness, but do you have receipts of exactly what the state forester didn't do? I know you've personally lost some property with that. So what is going forward also with the forestry department?
Yeah, the forestry department, first off, that's 33% of Department of Ag's budget, which I think most people will find shocking. So it's about $75 million a year that we spend on forestry people, or really they're firefighters, I think is what they would say. They're forest firefighters in the state of Oklahoma. And really, I'm not blaming anybody for those fires. What I'm questioning and what I'm frustrated with, like most Oklahomans, is this was a time to save property and save lives. And if we didn't have all of our resources there on those fires, that's frustrating. And then furthermore, 2 days later, when the humidity went up and the winds were down and we had a chance to get those put out on Saturday and Sunday, we should have had all resources there. Furthermore, the fact that we can't get answers about where their assets were around the state is further proof that this is a deep-seated bureaucracy that are trying to protect their actions. We still haven't been able to figure out where they were during that thing. So there were in Stillwater, Oklahoma, asking for resources, and I think if all the resources were spent, we get it. There was just a lot of fires going on, but that wasn't the case. And if there were assets that were not deployed during that event, myself as governor, I've got to hold people accountable for that. So we're digging into that. We will get you that information as soon as we find it. But there's going to be, here's the deal. Why do I even have a Department of Forestry? Let's just get rid of the whole thing. That'd save $75 million for the taxpayers. Or let's take $50 million of that and let's give it to our local firefighters. Let's give it to our volunteer fire departments, the folks throughout the state that are actually already there doing this, because the bureaucracy in Oklahoma City let our local folks down. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it, and I'm not going to not keep asking those questions. I've also put Secretary Everest and Secretary Arthur, and I'm going to have them, kind of convene a task force to do a post-mortem on this, to find this out, to report back on what we can do better next time when there is an event like that. We really haven't looked at them yet. We're going to wait and see what the legislature does on it. I'm sure my team has, but I've been, I haven't personally looked at those yet.
Governor, over here on your, sorry, I got the mic. On your executive order related to religious freedoms in schools, yesterday the Attorney General put out a press release saying that essentially you're going to have to be prepared to allow the state to fund religious schools pushing things like radical Islam, Satanism, Scientology, religions that aren't Christian faiths. And I wonder if you're looking at it that way, and what you make of that challenge that the Attorney General is pointing out.
Well, first off, I find it offensive to people of the Muslim faith that he's calling it radical. Not all Muslims are radical, and so I find that offensive. That's the point of religious liberties. What you may not think is a good religion. When are you going to say that you're frustrated with my religion? You don't like the way my church worships, right? So that's the whole thing. Listen, religious liberties are the keys to all other liberties, right? Our founding fathers knew that. My executive order basically is lined up with the United States Supreme Court. There's been major decisions recently that said if you're going to have a public benefit, you cannot discriminate based on someone's religion. So that's all my executive order said was, hey, Historical Preservation Society, if you're going to have a grant program to preserve a historical building and you're going to prove something, and some other Catholic charities qualifies for everything, you can't exclude them, or you can't exclude them based on their faith. That's all this says. Arts Council. So all of our different state agencies need to go back and make sure they're not excluding people based on faith alone, right? That's all that says. I think most Oklahomans agree with me. The St. Isidore Charter School really excited for the Supreme Court. I mean, you don't know how big that is, guys. The Supreme Court never hears cases. Like probably 1% they'll accept cert on a case. Everybody wants their case to go to the Supreme Court. And for the Supreme Court to grab the St. Isidore case in Oklahoma, we think it's going to be a historic, religious freedom case in the country because, here's the deal. If a parent, you don't have to send your kid to St. Isidore's Catholic charter school. Okay? If you're not a Catholic, I'd probably say don't do it unless you just want to send them there because it's going to be the best outcomes and you're going to have the best ACT scores and your kids are going to have the best opportunities later on. Then yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of kids that want to go to that school. But you don't have to go is my point. You can go to any school you want, and if you want to set up a Hebrew school, a Jewish school, and if there's enough families that want to set that up, then that's okay. That's exactly what religious freedoms are about. We can start any church we want in America and in Oklahoma, and we should be able to start any school that we want in Oklahoma and in America. And I think the Supreme Court agrees with that. Most Oklahomans agree with it. And again, the Attorney General is trying to protect his position. He's trying to spin people in a circle on this and try to fearmonger about radical, I think, what did you say? He calls it radical Islam. I find that offensive. I've got great Pakistani friends. I'm actually speaking this weekend at the Pakistani Doctors Association. They're coming into Oklahoma with thousands and thousands of Pakistani doctors from around the country. They're predominantly Muslim and great folks. And who am I to say that that's bad if they want to practice their religion or they want to educate their kids that way? We shouldn't stand in the way. The government shouldn't stand in the way. Should the government pay for it? Should the money fall to the student? 100%. Yeah, and let me give you another example. We already have, if we have a public benefit, for example, Medicaid, we've talked about that a little bit. There's $8 billion spent in Medicaid in the state of Oklahoma. About 1 million people are on Medicaid. Aged, blind, pregnant women, children, the working poor, people under 138% of the poverty line, they have a Medicaid, Sooner Care, all right? We don't restrict them to only go to a government hospital or a government doctor. Guess what? They can go to a Pakistani doctor. They can go to St. John's in Tulsa, which is a Catholic hospital. They can go to St. Francis. Anybody that accepts Medicaid, that's public dollars going to a private Catholic hospital. Okay? There's no difference. Same thing with food stamps. We don't require, the state spends $2 billion a year on food stamps, right? Food insecurity people. And we don't require you to go to just your local government grocery store, right? They can go to any grocery store you want. And as a Christian, I can have a grocery store and I accept food stamps, right? So there's no difference. So this argument that we're using state dollars, no. We're educating our kids and we're putting parents in charge of education. It's a big difference than people trying to spin this, calling it radical Muslim or whatever he said. Yes, sir. No. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Contrails, man.